Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, as I've supported men in their love and work lives for 15 years now, many men ask for the right words to say to be more successful, attractive, and desirable. But I found it's not so simple as giving scripts or lines because every man is different. So giving words or scripts would be like giving a tall, thin man a shorter, wider man's pants, or vice versa. The words have to make sense for you and your personality, and there's so much happening beneath the surface that people are responding to. If you're interested in how to become a better lover and leader in your own unique way, go to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz, or you can text ALIVE to 44144. It only takes a couple minutes and you'll start to get an idea of how you can be both more respected and desired. After you fill it out, we can schedule a time to review your quiz and talk about your specific challenges and desires. So again, go to either shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text ALIVE to 44144. That's ALIVE to 44144. Enjoy this episode of Man Alive. Hello and welcome to this joint episode. I'm so excited to be here today with Melanie Curtin of the Dear Men podcast. She's a sex and relationship coach for men. And
for me to be here with Shana James, a dating and relationship coach for men and host of the Man Alive podcast. This is a very special joint podcast that we're both dropping at the same time, which is
I love it. So fun.
So today we're talking about a topic I've been wanting to do for a while, but haven't exactly found the right in. So I'm thrilled to be addressing it today. And part of what we're going to be talking about is the pattern of men feeling like they can never get it right, and then women emasculating them, and perhaps the deeper reasons for that pattern, like why is it showing up and why is it so common? I think it shows up a lot. Very, even, in real relationships, also represented in TV and film. It just feels like it's it's prevalent. So
I think a lot of men tend to feel left out when the description of, the man-woman dynamics is more like, men being the abusers and men being the aggressors. There are a lot of women who are intense and aggressive and, verbally abusive or just bitchy and mean. And you and I both care about men and we would like to see less of this happening.
I think that's a really good point. And I also kind of want to own I've totally done this. Been there, been inside this, not necessarily in romantic relationships, but I kind of want to take ownership and explore the underlying dynamics, because I don't think that's always what's being discussed. I think
that would be a great place to start, I think. And I can share my own moments too. If you're open to it, I'm curious what came to mind when you said I've done this with men.
Yeah. So I think that I have noticed that I'm really good at leading, and I'm good at organizing. I'm good at executing. I'm good at, putting things together. And in some parlance, we would say being in my masculine. I'm pretty good at accomplishing and doing and all of that stuff.
Yep.
And I really don't want to do that all the time.
Right.
So what I've noticed is I get resentful if I'm in a relationship, and it doesn't even need to be a romantic relationship. I've noticed that this comes up mostly with guy friends, not so much with my women friends. But it can come up with my women friends too. But it's when I feel like the other person's not contributing, or I feel like I'm constantly the one that's sort of driving things forward.
Like driving the bus or making things happen.
Yeah. Like, what are we going to eat tonight? Or where are we going to stay tomorrow night when we're on the road? Or
then what happens for you? Because, you just said, right, you have that sense of, I don't want to do it all the time. And a vulnerable response to that could be something like, oh, this isn't working for me, or I'm not happy, or I would really love you to step up, but it sounds like something happens for you where it comes out more explosive or more intense.
Yeah, or more resentful. like more
Resentful. Uh-huh.
resentful. And so
Uh-huh.
I think what you said is really key, because I think that a lot of times there's many of us weren't actually taught how to ask for what we need
No.
in life, right?
Yep.
So we weren't really role modeled the
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable response or
Mm-hmm.
the vulnerable ask. And so, what do I do? That's a good question. What is it that
Yeah.
I do? Okay, fine. Well, I guess I'll book it.
Uh-huh.
I'll do that. So I'll
So you
do
get kind of
all.
like cold, a little more cold and
Yeah, or
uh-huh.
like passive aggressive, like
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna take care of it, but I'm annoyed that I'm taking care of it.
Yes.
Like that's not, which is not fair. That's not
Yeah.
fair. And I think that there's this thing that happens where it will sort of build up over a few hours.
Uh-huh.
I'm already like, I'm sort of like, oh, I wonder if, you know, when I get home, and I've noticed this has shown up with housemates as well. So when I've lived
Interesting.
in community, it's not just, like I said, it's not just romantic
Yes. Right. The
relationship.
closer you are to someone, the more likely it's to happen. The more
Yeah.
there's someone's in your space. And
And so I remember like, it would be like, um, I wonder if when I get home, the recycling will have been taken out. Because
uh-huh.
when I left, it was full, right? And I've lived in houses with multiple adults, so not
Yes.
just one or two roommates. And if I get home and it's not taken out, I like stomp around, right? Like so, so the response is not like a mature like. And in some cases, it's sort of almost, well, what am I going to say and who am I going to say it to,
Right.
in a generalized way? But and we can get into that, because I
Yeah.
think what we really want to focus on is the man-woman dynamic in
Yeah.
a romantic relationship. But I'll stomp around. I'll still do the task.
Yeah.
I'll be pissed about
Yeah.
it.
Well, and I think you're speaking to this really amazing dynamic that I'm sure I could speak to my own stories about too, which is okay, instead of like what I relate to in there is I often still, after 20 years of spiritual work and therapy and yoga and all this shit, I still feel scared to ask for what I want. I still feel scared that if somebody says no to me, I'm going to be so hurt and disappointed that I just won't even know what to do with myself, or I'll be so embarrassed that I will, I'll be so emotional and then I'll seem high maintenance and I'll be seen in all these ways. So like right underlying that intense angry response is actually this very, very tender place.
I think that's really true. And I also think that the deepest level is, um, am I alone?
Mm,
And am I seen?
am I
Like, do you
seen?
see me? Do I
Yes.
matter? Am I
Oh,
alone? Like, do I have to do everything myself? Because it makes me
yeah.
feel deeply alone when I'm in
I
the I
relate to
have to
that
do
one too.
everything myself place. I
Yeah,
just feel like, ugh, I'm
right.
like heavy and burdened and all of these all of these things.
Totally.
And I also noticed sort of like the flip side of that is sometimes when I would come home and things would be done, like, oh,
Mhm.
somebody took out the trash, somebody did dishes. I have this like feeling of amazement,
I yes.
like just like joy and just like amazement, because I think
Yes.
my system is somehow, I don't know, like trained to think that it won't happen or
Right. Trained to
something.
think that you are alone and that it's not going
Yeah,
to happen.
exactly.
Mhm.
So it subverts this expectation. And so there's just this like, oh,
Delight, like
like
the angels have
hallelujah
come.
moment. Like,
Well, isn't that amazing though? How also what that speaks to is like how easy it is, and okay, I don't want to say this for some men who are in a dynamic where it's not easy, right? It's not always as easy as if you do one thing, suddenly she will be happy because sometimes she's stuck in that dynamic. But it can be really easy. I remember on one episode saying like, if someone cleans my sink out for me, like I'll start to cry or I'll feel so happy. So, and I love just going back to what you said, like, am I seen and do I matter to someone? And I think if I will be so bold as to say, I think one of the dynamics that happens for women a lot is that women do not feel seen or heard or attuned to, especially in their hearts or from a heartfelt place, more like it's more often more intellectual, and so then we can stay hardened and heady and strong and got it together, powerful masculine, right, to kind of not have to feel the pain of not being seen or not being felt.
I think that's a really good point, because when I imagine a couple and he's distracted, maybe he's on his phone a lot,
Yep.
he's not that present in his body, he's like he's physically there, but he's
Yep.
not
But not really
emotionally
emotionally.
solidly really like attuning to her,
Yep.
then I imagine that some kind of escalation will will occur, and it
Yeah.
might be her getting pissed about the dishes not being done, but it's
Yes.
really not about the dishes. And so
Yes.
if I imagine being a man, it's pretty confusing because
Totally.
it feels like it's about the dishes. It
Mhm.
really feels like it's about the dishes. And it's like, why is this such a big deal? This
Yeah.
doesn't like the
It doesn't
proportional, it's
feel
not a
like it
proportional
shouldn't be that
response.
big of a deal.
It
I've
shouldn't be.
seen my dad say that 100 times at least. Like, oh, this is not such a big deal. Or like, I'll take out the garbage later. And I'm like, Dad, it's not about the garbage. You know, I don't know how to say it to you so that you can really understand that it's right. It's about feeling misunderstood and not feeling supported and not feeling met. And like, I feel the pain of the feminine in that place of, right, I am alone. And I feel even more alone because I'm with someone. So, right, it's even more painful to be alone together.
Yeah, and I think I think I don't know if I'm the only one who has this, probably not, but I think I have some kind of story around if I don't do it, it won't get done.
Oh yeah, no, you're not alone in
Oh,
that.
okay,
I
okay.
have that
So
one too.
so I think it affirms that sort of story, like, if
Yeah,
I come home and some things aren't done, it's like it affirms that, like, if
yeah,
I don't do it, nothing will happen,
yeah.
which I think is a little bit, I think, reveals the masculine confusion around, like, I don't understand why you expect me to be a mind reader. Like, why
Yes.
don't you just ask me to
Yeah.
do to do the thing that you're frustrated that I didn't do?
Yep.
And I think that's completely fair.
Yeah.
Um, it's just it's interesting because when I have experienced it, it's almost like I can ask you, but I'm already resentful. Like I'm already
Right.
now I'm already resentful. So when I ask, it's like, could you take out the trash,
Yeah.
please?
Right.
Which is
Which
like,
is it is our
ugh.
work as women to
Yes.
deal with our own resentment and ask before we get resentful. But right, if we're looking from the male perspective too of, well, how the hell do I actually navigate this once my woman is pissed off and angry? Then we have to start to look at, okay, you know, can you go back to the understanding piece? Like, can you try to be curious and get her world about why she's so upset and let her vent or let her, and it might seem like, oh, well, she's been venting for years, right? But can you actually let her speak to why is this so painful without being like, oh, well, what's the big deal? It's just garbage or it's just the shed isn't cleaned out or whatever that is.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because I what I would imagine would work is if a man like put down his phone,
Uh-huh.
became really present,
Yeah.
and came over and was like, I'm going to take out the trash. I am going
Yeah.
to do that. And like,
And
how are you doing? What's going on?
yeah.
And is like really there.
Yeah.
Because I think if you have built up enough trust in a dynamic, I know for me, if a man really came towards me
Mhm.
present with
Mhm.
an open heart and was like, babe, what's going on?
Yeah.
I would tell him.
It's
I
hard
would
to resist.
right.
Yep.
But if it was like if it's kind of met with the same energy, that doesn't work.
Exactly. Right. If it's met with that same aggression or that same coldness or distance or whatever, it just escalates.
They're like, it's not a big deal. What are you talking about? Like, whatever.
It's so
That's not
dismissive.
right. That's not gonna work. So
No.
um yeah, I'm wondering, have you in your relationships, because you've been in, I think you've been in more conscious relationships than I so far.
Interesting.
um what have you noticed does work? Have you had a man approach you in that way, and has it
Yeah.
opened up the space?
Yeah, I mean, my current partner, I just feel incredibly grateful for him. He's so conscious and loving and attuned and deep. And it's not to say we never have stuff, but I was just thinking about we had this conversation. We went away this weekend actually, and I was like, if we lived together and I had to cook, if I was the one to cook all the time, like I would be super resentful. And I don't want to feel like the caretaker or the mommy. I was like, but if there were other things being done, then I would feel better. Anyway, we had this whole conversation and bringing it up because he could hear that without being like, well, fuck you, or well, that's not going to work for me, or here's what I need, right? It's like, can we let each other actually say all the things and the fears and the stories and the, without getting stuck on, well, then that's who you are. Right. And you're not going to change. And so, now we're stuck in this dynamic. It's like, I think there is something when partners let each other talk through their own stories and imaginings and fears. And it's kind of more from this childlike place, and then get to that part of, okay, well, how would our mature selves actually want to collaborate around this or be
I like
creative?
that.
Let's
I
get
like that. How would our mature selves do this?
because clearly we're not in them in this moment.
I also really appreciate that you kind of predicted the future there, and
Uh-huh.
you were conscious enough and aware of your own patterns and able to sort of share them with him.
Yeah.
'Cause the way
Which
that
was
you shared
scary.
it is scary. But
Yeah.
the way that you just shared it wasn't. I guess what I'm saying is you weren't already in a state of agitation.
Right.
You
Right.
weren't you weren't there yet, and so
Yep.
you were able to do it with more of an open heart, because I think that's my work, and I think it's a lot of the work of the feminine is, like you said, figuring out how to share with an open heart. Because I
Yeah.
think once I'm in the resentful place, like, my heart's pretty closed. I'm just
Yes.
angry.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that is important about that story is the ability to teamwork it together. Like, well, how about
Yes. We're
this? How
on
about
the
that?
same
Like a
team.
workshop, yeah, like a
Mhm.
workshop type thing. And I think that one question that works for me that I think could work for other men or women is, how can I support you? Or how can I have you feel supported
Oh,
here?
I love that. I love that question.
Because then it's
Hearing
like,
that as a woman.
oh, right. It's like, oh, you know, what would really have me feel supported is blank, but it sort of addresses the key emotional piece, which is,
Hmm.
I'm not feeling supported. I don't
Yeah.
feel supported. I
Yeah.
feel like I've gotten home, nothing's been
I'm
done.
feeling alone,
Feeling
feeling.
alone. I'm
Mhm.
hungry.
Mhm.
Like, I there's no plan for food. If we order food, it's going to take 40 minutes. I'm
Yeah.
pissed about that. Like,
Yeah.
it's like by that point, it's like, what can I do to have you feel supported? And
Right.
I think in some cases, it might be, I think we should talk about this moving forward. Like, this
Exactly.
right.
You're
And
right.
the person to say that, I would love for the person to say that to be the man.
Interesting. Like
Yes.
you want
And
the man to say like, "Hey, this seems to be an ongoing problem, or this seems to be something that is really hard for you. So let's make a plan for the future so that this doesn't happen."
yeah. And
Hmm.
like, maybe it's, let's get you fed right now
Yes,
and
exactly.
talk about this
Future first.
later. Right. But I want to come back to this because I want to make sure you feel supported.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure I feel
Oh,
respected.
that feels so sweet and
Right.
respected, you said?
Yes. I want to
Mhm.
make sure you feel supported, and I
Yep.
want to make sure I feel respected.
Uh-huh.
Because I think if I imagine being the man, I don't feel respected.
Right.
And when she's being
Oh my
bitchy,
God. I that's what I've really learned over the years. I think respect is the cornerstone of a relationship. If you're disrespecting your own partner, I don't want to say, okay, you're a bad person, but if you're disrespecting your own partner, I would say there's something for you to look at. And I often saw this in the family dynamic too, where I was just like, do you think that yelling and criticizing is actually going to help him step into doing the things you want done? Because for the women listening, like it never does. It just has him go farther and farther into this more ghost like defeated place that you're going to get more pissed about.
that's a really good point. And I think that's the I think that's the cycle that needs to be interrupted, because if
Hmm.
you grew up in that kind of home, then it's what you learned about
Right.
how you interact. And so there's this, yeah, I guess there's this automatic thing that happens, right?
Hmm.
Like, it's
Hmm.
just, it's automatic, it's unconscious, and it takes a lot of effort. It takes energy to break a pattern like
Yeah.
that.
Hmm.
And I think that these conversations, like, coming back to that situation, saying, like, let's get you fed right now. This is a critical need, important. We got to
Yes.
take care of this. Like, right now, I'm making food. I'm going to make some food for us.
Hmm.
And let's come back to this, is the first step of breaking the cycle. Because a
Yeah.
lot of times, what I've noticed is that if it's not addressed, it's sort of like that moment passes,
Totally.
dinner
And then you
happens.
just hope and pray that the next time it's not going to happen again.
Yeah. And of course it does.
Of course. Right. And really see too that anytime we have these patterns that seem automatic, they're not actually automatic, right? You said it takes a lot of time and effort or energy and effort or whatever to shift them, but they can be shifted when someone's willing. That's another thing too, is, I have some men right now who are in relationships with women who have just, I don't know, they've just closed up, dried up, gone away. They're not willing to actually look at the dynamic together. And it just breaks my heart. And eventually, as a man, I think you have to get to that place of, if a woman's not willing to change or willing to respect or willing to collaborate with you, it's just going to be suffering and misery.
Yeah, which brings us a little bit back to my borderline personality disorder episode of
Mm,
a few weeks ago.
yeah.
So if you are a man and it feels like you're with someone who's pretty rigid and unchanging and um, abusive, I would listen to that episode. Yeah.
Yes,
But I
definitely.
wanted to go back to what you said about the like basically there was a moment when you were like, oh, I can tell that if we live together and I'm the one cooking all the time, I'm gonna get resentful.
Uh-huh.
I can feel that, like I
Yeah.
know that that's gonna happen. Excuse me. If you hadn't had that awareness
Yeah.
and you two lived together and you were cooking a lot and you started getting resentful, I want to talk about leadership in the masculine
Hmm.
and polarity and reverse polarity, because what I've noticed is that I think that in dynamics I've seen like this, I've never actually had a man say like, "Hey, I'd like to talk about this."
Hmm. Wow.
What I've seen is that they kind of just want it to go away. Like they
Yeah.
want me to feel better, and then once I feel better, it's like, "Oh, relief!" Like that
Oh,
passed.
phew. Thank God it's over. I don't have to
Yeah,
deal with
and
that.
they don't really want to bring it up or address it, or like maybe they were scared to. I'm not sure, but it doesn't. I guess my point is it makes me feel a little bit alone as well, of
Yeah.
like, okay, I guess if we're gonna actually resolve this kind of exchange that we have, I'm gonna be the one to drive that conversation. And
Right.
so I'm
Which
wondering,
can
like,
feel exhausting and puts you back into your masculine in a way.
exactly. And that's what I wanted to touch on is in terms of polarity and dynamics. I think that in our culture, the word masculine comes with all of this stupid bullshit attached to it. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of what I appreciate about that side of a dynamic is leading.
Yeah.
And for me, leading is often about leading the difficult conversation, actually
Mm.
bringing up the thing we need to talk about, creating space for us to have a conversation. And I have had very few male
Men.
partners
Hmm.
have, yeah, very few men who have actually been able to do that. And I'm
Wow.
wondering if you can talk a little bit about, like, do you have a theory as to why that is?
That's a good question. I mean, right. Oh, okay. So I'm thinking about men. One of the things is that the men are raised to suck it up, get over it, don't be a pussy, don't have feelings, you know, don't. And so I think when you're not taught to sit in the midst of, wow, this is uncomfortable. It's okay for me to feel everything I'm feeling. It's okay for me to have desires and things that aren't happening here. It's okay for me to feel longing. It's okay for me to feel fear, right? If all of that's conditioned out of you, then you're kind of just left with, like, curtain down. Let me just see if I can ignore and avoid this for as long as possible. And hopefully it'll go away because I've not been trained on how to actually even navigate it. That's my first thought.
I think that's really accurate. And I think, especially, I remember one of my first boyfriends, we were pretty serious, and we were home at his place for the
Yeah.
holidays or something. And this is such a funny story. I find this very really amusing. But I would notice that I didn't know what the word stonewalling meant,
Uh-huh.
which um, I've since learned. And I think I let me just tell this story and then we'll get to stonewalling.
Okay.
So I'm at the dinner table. It's me, him, his mother, and his sister.
Mhm.
So it's him and three women. And uh
Oh God.
and we're eating dinner, and his mom said either his mom or his sister said something, and they sort of started to get into it. And I also said something because I felt like one of them was not being fair or
Yeah.
whatever. And I saw my boyfriend like literally like put his head down, like eat his food. And I was like, oh, this is what you do. This is a
Uh-huh.
thing that you do is you completely check out of
Yes.
conflict
Yeah.
and that's your strategy. And I could see in that moment, I was like, oh, this is how you grew up.
Yes.
This was how you figured out to handle emotional conflict in your home.
Yep.
And you do it with us. He would
Yes.
do that and not he wouldn't physically put his head down,
Right. It
but
wouldn't physically put his head down, but that's exactly what's happening
no, there was
emotionally.
this like shuddering effect of just
Mhm,
like he just
mhm.
like went away. And I was like,
Where are you? Where did you,
what
what
am I
happened?
supposed to do now? So and I've since sort of learned that, stonewalling is essentially just you just don't say anything
Yeah.
in conflict. Like
Just go quiet.
you just go quiet. And
Well, and usually it's going quiet, but inside there's either a lot going on or conflicting things going on, feeling bad about oneself because I want something I shouldn't want it, I don't know, or they've even stonewalled from themselves, right? Because it was so uncomfortable at some point to feel that conflict or, that tension that
and I
I've been with partners who just have gone away and they can't even, it takes some time to find themselves to come back.
and I think that in his case, and I think in the case of a lot of men, it's sort of like, what's the point? I think
Mhm.
when they were young, it was like it doesn't matter if I say something, I'm just talked
Right.
over,
And
right?
nothing got solved.
Nothing got solved. And so if I'm just talked over, or if it just seems to make things worse, there's
Yes.
no point in me saying something. It's like this
Yes.
thing that I think again, it's like unconsciously ingrained, and then it becomes a behavior
Yep.
that men will do in relationship. And it takes a lot of energy to kind of like get over that hump and to trust like, oh, maybe this partner isn't going to be like that.
Right. Like what, again, back to our mature selves. How would we, as our mature selves, have these conversations? And if I don't know how, which is another thing that men can tend to get, um, hesitant around, if I don't know how to do it, I shouldn't do it because I need to be effective. So if I'm not going to be effective at this, why try it in the first place? So it's okay if you don't know how, right? It's okay if you don't know how to have difficult conversations. There's lots of support out there. Either one of us works with men having these conversations. There are many books to read, So educate yourselves and learn. It's a skill. It's not something that you should know how to do. I think about that in sex too, where men are often hesitant to ask a woman, how do you like it? Or how would you want me to touch you? And like somehow you should know every woman is so different.
Yeah.
Every moment, I say this all the time, every moment is different in our cycles, in our moods. It changes how our bodies react, right? So you don't have to know. You more have to be willing. And again, like you said before, to be on the same team and collaborate.
I'm curious in your current relationship or in relationships you've had, what has been effective when you've been in a mood or you're sort of already at the point of like, okay, I'm annoyed, I'm
Yeah.
irritated, I'm
Yeah.
agitated, something's going on, I don't feel supported.
Mhm.
What have you, do you have any memorable moments of it working? Like a man has actually
Yeah,
said
I mean,
that
when
worked?
I do my own work to name the irritation or the frustration or the resentment without attacking, without speaking from it, that helps. Sometimes, right, when I have a partner, and I do right now, who's able to just handle tons of emotion and energy, we can actually make some space. Like, oh, I feel irritated and I just kind of need to stomp around for a moment, or and sometimes I'll go outside and do it, or sometimes I'll go to another room, or sometimes we'll do it together. But right, anytime that I come from that place of resentment or irritation, it doesn't go well. And so on either side, whether it's, any gender, right? On either side, I think the ability, I say this in my TED talk, right? The ability to say what you're saying, to witness, okay, first to check in with what am I feeling, to notice it, and then to be able to communicate from that place of witnessing rather from that place of being completely blown out and overly emotional. That is a huge change. And what I realized too is that we're talking to men who have really emotionally intense women. And so how do you stand up to a woman in that way, right? You've got to have, we talked about this a little bit before we started, you've got to have some kind of spine while also having the open-hearted attunement, or, seeing her while also being like, thou shalt not pass. I am not okay with this dynamic anymore.
Yeah. I want you to feel respected and I want to feel, or I want you to feel supported and I want to feel respected.
Yes.
Because I think there's a sacrificing thing that happens if you're just sacrificing yourself to her emotional storm all the time. That's not a healthy dynamic.
Right.
And I think what's important about what you just said is that there are two sides, and on
Mhm.
her side, it is important for her to be able to say, "I'm annoyed, I'm irritated, I'm angry, I'm
Mhm.
upset,"
Mhm.
and for him to be able to meet that.
Yeah.
And I think that's what.
Without going down that shame spiral of, now I'm wrong, I'm bad, I'm a horrible person, right? It's okay if she gets irritated. We all get irritated.
Yeah, and I think that is the. I guess that's what I'm asking is, I'm wondering if, like, have you ever been angry or annoyed or upset, and your man is like, "Something going on? What's going
Yes.
on?"
Yes. It's
Like, rather than you having to name
amazing.
it every time, because that's sort of what I'm asking about is I would imagine that would feel especially good because then I'm going into the conversation already
Yeah.
feeling noticed
Yep.
and feeling attuned to.
Right.
Do
And
you
when
find
he's not caught in that shame spiral of, oh shit, I'm wrong, she's feeling something, I'm wrong. When he can playfully come over to me and be like, I see that look in your eyes. And I know that when that look in your eyes is there, you're pissed about something. So why don't you tell me, can tell me what it is, and let's handle this together. Right. So again,
that?
that
I love that. That little speech made me so happy. I would love for someone to say that to me. That would make me really
yeah.
happy. That was good, Shayna.
Mm. Well, right, it's exactly what you said. We really love being seen. And I often hesitate making it about gender because we're in such a gender expansive world, and who knows. But there is something about the feminine in man or woman, male or female, whatever, but the feminine aspect, let's call it, that really thrives on being seen and noticed and appreciated. And
And this really does feel like one of those dynamics that I've witnessed in my friends that does, for some reason, really feel like it happens a lot where the woman is nagging or upset or irritated and the man feels like he can never get it right.
yeah,
Like it for some reason does feel like there's something going on there. It's
yeah.
so common
Hmm.
and it's so it just feels kind of draining to the dynamic.
Yeah.
And I since we're both, sex and relationship coaches, I want to ask you about, how do you think this affects a couple's sex life?
Oh,
This is
wow.
yeah.
I would say it kills a couple's sex life. Really. When I imagine a woman, who it's interesting, right? Because you could play this out in the bedroom. And if a woman really wants to be dominant, you could play with, if you're open to surrendering, a man's open to surrendering, right? You could play with, hey, let's bring this energy into the bedroom. But if it's happening unconsciously and she's feeling unheld, unseen, misunderstood, right? If her heart is withered in that way, her body is not likely to open to you.
No, and I think a big part of what you spoke to was the spine and a man finding his backbone and really being able to hold these conversations and hold the energy.
Yeah.
And that requires development, that
Mhm.
requires
Mhm.
a more solid nervous system. It requires some practices to feel like you're in your power. So I guess I just sort of want to name that it's more than just figuring this out and reading a book. Like it does
Yes,
actually require physical practices because
definitely.
especially a woman's storm is a lot of energy. It's a lot of energy to manage, or not manage isn't the right word, but yeah, hold, be with,
Wow, or
be
hold
able
space
to
for.
hold
Yeah.
space for all of that stuff. And I think it is important to reiterate that, you know, not every woman is going to be able to have that conversation. Again, back to the borderline episode, which they're trying to rename emotional regulation disorder. If you're with a woman who
Wow.
truly
Yeah.
is not able to have a conversation about why she's annoyed and not make you really wrong and it, basically be abusive,
Yep.
it's not going to matter how many times you have that conversation. I guess I just wanted to, make sure that's in this conversation, that it's not just about you leading. It's not just about
Right.
you
Right.
creating space and holding space and all this stuff. If your partner can't actually meet you, which I know for me, many of the clients in our program have come in and been with borderline women in the past,
Yep.
and at a certain point, the move is to set the boundary of not being in that relationship anymore, right?
Yes.
If you've tried multiple times, you've tried all the things, you've tried it every different way, and there's still abuse coming at you, then you need to leave that
Right.
relationship. It
Right.
doesn't mean that it just goes away. It's not like you lead this conversation and therefore it works.
Right.
It's you lead the
Agreed.
conversation and you see how it goes.
Hmm.
You lead the conversation and you see what the response is.
Right. Is she able to come a little bit closer, to get a little bit more vulnerable every time you have a conversation like that? Or is there no headway being made?
Exactly, because what you said of, what did you say that he would say? Oh, babe, I could see that look in your eye. That's the I'm pissed look. So let's hear what's going on and deal with this together.
Right, which is a welcoming of that
So good to
storm.
me.
Like, oh, I
Yes.
want to hear it. And one of the things I was thinking as you were talking before was for men to know uh the when you actually consciously allow the emotions to move through, they tend to move through. When you are not consciously meeting them or allowing for them, they just are like stuck and naggy, and right, that's where it just gets like and irritable. But if you can invite more of, all right, let's let it out, let's, tell me about what's going on for you. Again, if a woman is a healthy and in a mature place in her life and emotional development, she tends to then be free on the other side of that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good word, free, because what I imagine, like when I imagine that scenario that you described of him walking over and being like, "Hey, I see that storm brewing. I can see it in your eyes. I can see the little tornadoes growing like this in your eyes." I already feel soothed. Like there's a
Yes.
way that I already, like, it's already taking my level of irritation down a notch,
Uh-huh. Right, you
because
feel
I
less
feel
alone, you feel
less
more
alone.
connected with,
Exactly. And then I think,
cared for.
mhm, rather than it's escalating.
Yeah.
Right.
Or like I
Escalating.
just imagine someone being like, what's that saying? What's got your goat or
Oh
something?
yeah.
Like
Right.
what's wrong with you? Or or like you look like you're in a bad mood. It just
Yes.
feels so dismissive as
Yes.
opposed to caring.
And also, it sort of feels like I don't actually care what's going
Uh-huh.
on with you. I just want things to be smooth for
Right.
me.
I just want to get
I just
back
want
to
things to be smooth
happy.
for me. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Which is not the same thing as what we're talking about, which is
No.
sort of like, because I think that implies we're not really on the same team. We're
Right.
two different people in the house doing our different things. I just want things to be easy. Why
Right.
aren't you easy?
Right,
That's what I
right.
hear.
Easy and trying to get, and if you get your needs met, it takes away somehow from what I could have met, as opposed to that clarity again of, okay, how can we navigate this together? All right, you have a hard time when I get angry, but if I'm not allowed to get angry, I become bitchy. And so, right, sometimes that is, let's go to a couples therapist. Let's each do our own work. But do something as opposed to just settling is my hope and prayer, right? Don't just settle for that dynamic. It's just like allowing yourself to get beat up daily.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I also think, um, be wary of just wanting it to be easy.
Yes.
And
Yes.
because I
Yes.
do think there's a lot of men who they wait for it to blow over, and then it's like they're walking on eggshells. They're
Yeah.
walking on eggshells. They're like, I don't want to, trip that tripwire again. So I'm not going to bring up the dynamic itself, or I'm not going
Yep.
to sort of lead anything here. I'm leaning back. You can't see me because you're listening to a podcast, but I'm just kind of going to lean back and sort of be a bit
Right.
passive
And I just
and
started laughing
hope.
because I just thought like,
Yeah.
oh, there's no makeup sex there, right? The thing about makeup sex is that often it is those emotions and the intensity and the passion is expressed and allowed, and that allows for people to feel passionate. When
Yeah.
we're clamping down on it or just trying to avoid it or ignore it, that passion does not come through our bodies.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting. I've spoken to a few conscious couples, and one thing I've noticed is that they're skilled at using their physical bodies to express.
Hmm.
So, one of my couple friends, he'll say, I think you need to growl. Let's growl. And she'll like, "Ugh!"
Yes.
Right? Or another one, they do pushing.
Hmm.
So sometimes it'll be like irritated, I'm annoyed. And they'll be like, all right, let's do some pushing. And so they
Uh-huh.
mostly she's pushing him.
Yeah.
I mean, he pushes her too, not in an abusive way, but
Yes.
it's like physically getting it out. And I
Yes.
think that's really cool because it feels like an advanced practice, but it feels really hopeful and a different way of doing it. That's not just like
We have to blah,
NVC and
blah, blah. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And like the talking it out, like I think talking is great, don't get me wrong.
Mhm.
And it feels like where we're headed, sort of third stage relationships, there's a lot more possible. There's a lot
Yeah.
more ways of expressing what's
Yes.
going on. And I remember one of my close friends saying once, she said, almost all of our fights just come down to I'm not feeling safe.
Uh-huh. Not feeling safe. I'm not feeling understood or loved or
Yeah.
cared for.
And so it's really just our bodies, like our physical body nervous systems need to come back into connection. And I need to know like he's there. I need to
Yes.
and be like, oh,
To
he's there.
feel
He's here
physically
with me. He's
connected.
physically here. Yeah. And
Hmm.
that's not always done through words.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's done like I would imagine with the pushing, it's like, oh, he's here. He's here. He's got his attention
Yes.
on me. He's physically with me. He's present. He's with me.
Yep.
And it's sort of like, okay, the sort of
Our
like,
nervous systems actually settle and then we get to feel safe. And then that reaction, that young place that's, pissy, bitchy, explosive, resentful, whatever, right, gets to have some, oof, okay, I can feel settled.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a good place to wrap up.
Wrap. I think so too.
Yeah. Any sort of last advice that you would have for a man who does feel like this is a common pattern in his relationship?
Yeah. The thing I was just thinking is that in a time when this is not happening, to actually have more of a meta or a contextual conversation around, hey, I'm noticing some dynamics in our relationship and here's what I would like to shift. Here I and it could be things too where you notice it seems like I'm trying to think of how to say this in a way. Not like it seems like you're frustrated a lot, but I get a sense, right? Or it seems like you are upset and I don't want you to be upset, not because of I need it to be easy, but because that looks really hard for you over there and I care about you. And I also care about me and I'm realizing that, it's important for me to feel respected and when shame me or attack me or whatever, I don't feel respected. So I want to collaborate on this. I want to be on the same team and have these conversations and figure out how do we treat each other really well and how do we love each other well and how do we both get to feel
Mm-hmm.
supported and accepted. So I
Mm-hmm.
would say right outside of a moment of fire where you're you need to put out the fire, have these more overarching conversations about how you're treating each other and how you're navigating a relationship.
Absolutely. And then track the response to that.
Yeah.
If the response to that is way out of control and escalates really fast and you
Mhm.
feel attacked again, that's important information.
Yes.
If the response to that is, you're right, I'm sorry, I get really overwhelmed and whatever. If she starts opening up and you feel
Mhm.
met,
Partnership, you feel connected.
you feel connection, that's information because I think a lot of times there's a fear around even bringing it up because
Yep.
what's she going to say? If you bring it up and she explodes, that's really important information for you.
Yeah.
It's not just this thing on the side and like it shouldn't just be confirmation bias of like, oh, see, I should never bring it up. It
Right.
should
It's
be,
more
I
like,
wonder if I should
"Oh,
be in this relationship. It should
yes.
be more like that.
Yes, exactly."
Yeah.
Any last thoughts you have?
Honestly, my thought is get support
Mhm.
outside of the relationship. Make sure that you have support, a men's group, a coaching program, a therapist, some kind of other support in your life, because I think that one of the things that worsens this dynamic is if you feel completely emotionally dependent upon this person.
Right.
It raises the stakes and it makes it feel like I really don't want to have that conversation because what if she does get mad again? I don't want to be in the doghouse again. This is my only
Source.
connection.
Mhm.
Exactly. I think that makes it a lot more dangerous of a place to be. And I have a client who just graduated our program who said something like that of, he was like, I was only really able to leave her once I had other deep
Connection and support.
friendships in my life. Yeah, more other support, because before then it was like, I'm not going anywhere. I don't
Right.
have anything else
I don't
going
want to
on.
be out by myself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having this
Yeah.
conversation.
That was fun.
Yeah, this is great.
Oh, I guess we should do the if you want to listen to Shayna's podcast.
If you want to, we should tell them where to find more of us.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yes. You can go to Apple Podcasts and look for the Dear Men podcast or the Man Alive podcast. My website is ShaynaJamesCoaching.com. And what's your website?
MelanieCurtin.com or pleaseherinbed.com.
Please her in bed. I love it. Thanks, Melanie. I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and it gave you something to consider and explore in your life. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com/quiz or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 to get a sense of how you can become a better lover and leader. You'll start to see how you can be both more respected and desired in your unique and genuine way. If you don't feel as confident or as excited about life or love as you'd like to be, this quiz is a really great starting point and will guide you toward a more passionate love life and a more inspiring and successful career. So again, text ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 or head over to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com/quiz. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.